And you still think that the drug could be safe for children?
Absolutely, it could be. We haven't got a licence in children yet. I feel sorry for anybody who has had any side effects from treatment or indeed has experienced the terrible symptoms of depression. We are trying to help people. The evidence, however, is clear. These medicines are not linked with suicide. These medicines are not linked with an increased rate of self-harm.
But we now know that's not true. And it's surprising that Dr. Benbow said it was. Just a month later, GlaxoSmithKline sent a confidential dossier to the MHRA, and it was Dr. Benbow himself who went to meet them to discuss its contents. The company was confident it would lead to a licence extension, allowing SEROXAT to be marketed for the treatment of certain anxiety disorders in under 18s. But the dossier contained a bombshell. GlaxoSmithKline's own clinical trial data revealed that the drug simply didn't work in depressed children. Worse still, it made them up to 3 times more likely to self-harm and attempt suicide than depressed children who were just given sugar pills. This was evidence the regulator had never seen before.
It was really a shock to them. In discussions directly with me, officials were saying, we have defended this drug for a decade. There's never been a sign, as far as we're concerned, about an issue here, and suddenly we're faced with this. And as that story unfolds, it becomes clearer and clearer that the way the information is put into the MHRA's possession and all of that is somewhat suspect, to say the least.
It was a very dramatic change in our thinking about SEROXAT in children. Remember, SEROXAT has never been licensed in children. It has never been licensed in children at all, but nevertheless, practitioners have, on their own behest, have used it extensively. Our best evidence is that some 7,000 children a year or children and adolescents were receiving SEROXAT.
Faced with GlaxoSmithKline's evidence, the MHRA acted quickly. Within a fortnight, SEROXAT was banned for use in depressed children. Ever the optimist, Dr. Benbow tried to minimise the damage when we spoke to him in June last year.
This increase is small. It's rather similar to, if you imagine a school of more than 1,000 children, all of whom are deeply troubled by depression, less than a small class size would have these suicidal thoughts or attempts. So it's a small but important signal.
A small class of suicidal children? That's not what Dr. Benbow told us in earlier interviews, or what doctors were led to believe by the few SEROXAT children's studies published in medical journals. But this episode has exposed a dangerous loophole at the heart of the regulatory system. Believe it or not, there's no legal requirement for drug companies to publish their trial results. So if they're not favourable, they often aren't published.
The International Committee of Medical Journal Editors.
For Dr. Tim Kendall, this almost proved disastrous. He's part of a team that advises the NHS on the best treatments for doctors to use. Last year, using just published trial data, they were about to recommend that SEROXAT and the other SSRIs could be prescribed to children for depression. But then the team asked the regulator for the unpublished trial results. These turned the recommendation on its head.
If you'd relied solely on the published data, what would your recommendation have been?
It would have been that we probably would have said use these drugs. And then there would have been children who might well have killed themselves further down the line as a result of our recommendations.
So what did you think as a scientist when you realised that there was this huge gulf between what was published and unpublished?
We were flabbergasted. We were completely taken aback. None of us had expected that the outcome of this would be that we would have completely changed our recommendations for the use of these drugs.
6 months after banning SEROXAT for children, the MHRA banned all the other SSRI antidepressants, except Prozac, for use in depressed children. The president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists is appalled that negative trial results could have been kept from child psychiatrists like him.
I personally felt cheated, and heaven only knows what the children, adolescents and their parents and their GPs on the other end of that felt, very much the same. I also felt very confused because I know that with some of my patients in the past, the SSRIs have been important in their recovery, as well as all the other things that I might be doing with them. And yet suddenly, the balance between risk and benefit was quite clearly tilted in a different way.
If we can't be sure if there are trials that are being withheld or not published for, sometimes years on end, this absolutely shakes the whole foundation of scientific medicine.
We wanted to ask GlaxoSmithKline just how long they'd been aware of the danger SEROXAT poses to depressed children, but on this occasion they decided not to do an interview. In a statement, they told us they only saw an indication of a problem in May last year, when they reviewed the results of all the children's studies they'd ever done. But the decision to ban the drug was based on 3 depression trials, and the last one of those finished in July 2001. The company doesn't explain why it took nearly 2 years to pass on the results of these to the MHRA.
Did GlaxoSmithKline act promptly in getting this information to you?
This is a matter which we are investigating at the present time. There is an investigation going on being conducted by the inspection and enforcement sector of the agency and with lawyers to decide whether or not they did.
Do you think 2 years is an acceptable delay?
That is what is being investigated by the lawyers at the present time.
But during that time, we both know that children were being prescribed a drug which we now know is harmful. What do you say to them and to their parents about why that was allowed to happen?
When we received the information, we acted with great rapidity.
I understand that.
We acted within 2 weeks of receiving the information.
I understand that, but why were you not in a position to get that information from them earlier? Did you not know that they were doing studies in children?
That is what is under investigation at the present time.
Might criminal charges be brought then?
That is a possibility.
Richard Brooke believes the only reason GlaxoSmithKline gave the MHRA the results at all was because they wanted a children's licence.
I'm absolutely certain that if Glaxo had not been going for an extension licence, the expert group would not have got to the paediatric information.
And so children could still have been being prescribed a drug that's harmful to them?
I think that's certainly a hypothesis that you can actually believe has got a lot of truth and credibility to it.
When the MHRA announced the SEROXAT children's ban last summer, it gave no hint that GlaxoSmithKline could have been aware of the safety concerns for years. It said the ban was based on new information. Richard Brooke says this was misleading.
I felt that the MHRA seemed to suggest it was new information to them and to Glaxo, and that I didn't think was fair. And I had several discussions after the press conference on the very day with the head of post-licensing, expressing my concern. We had a meeting subsequently, and in the end we were told that it would be looked at criminally, and anything that we did to raise the issues would be in breach of the procedures and the law that surrounded these sorts of things. In other words, we were warned off about making a fuss about it.
We got hold of a confidential internal GlaxoSmithKline memo. It shows the company knew that SEROXAT, also known as paroxetine, didn't work in depressed children as long ago as 1998.
It would be commercially unacceptable to include a statement that efficacy had not been demonstrated, as this would undermine the profile of paroxetine.
In other words, publishing negative trial results in children could seriously damage SEROXAT's health and GlaxoSmithKline's profits.
What did you think personally when you read that memo?
I was disgusted, horrified, that people could seriously consider withholding information about the prescribing of a drug that may do harm to children and certainly suggest that they don't work. To withhold that, or to suggest that they should withhold that, I think it's horrific.